So when we're talking about a backup heating source, living off grid, you have your wood stove and that's great, but sometimes you have to leave and go back to the real world and, well, the wood stove goes out. So I've found over the years it's nice to have some sort of backup heat. I've tried a few different kinds of backup heat, from kerosene heaters to RV furnaces. But last fall we decided to try a direct vent propane heater, as I like the idea that it vents the carbon monoxide outside and pulls outside air in as well. This one is an Ashley direct vent propane, 17,000 BTU. I believe it's called the DVL 20L. I bought it used and unopened off of Marketplace. I've been looking at these for a while, but I couldn't find much on the just the performance of them, so we're here to talk about that. So they're a lot bigger than the pictures make them out to be. This isn't even the biggest one, but you know, they do take up some wall space. They're pretty easy to install. They come with a bracket on the back and you're able to just kind of slide it. I guess it's kind of tricky to see in there, but you bolt that back bracket on and then the heater itself bolts to the bracket. Pretty simple. And you run, I believe it's called, it's soft copper line. In this case, 3/8. I'm running it directly off 20 and 30 pound propane tanks with an auto switcher out there. And these are flare fittings that you can make with a tool. Figured we would do a quick tutorial. Mind you, this type of copper tubing, I believe it's called Type L soft wall, or Type L soft copper tubing, is probably not up to code where you live. This information is just for entertainment purposes, but I figured I'd show you at least what a flare looks like. You need a pipe cutter, good old pipe cutter. Need a flare tool, and you need the other end of a flare tool. Let's do one together here. What we're trying to do, inside here there is a flare and a flare, and they mate through compression. There's no pipe dope or pipe tape that go on these generally. Once again, do your research on this kind of stuff. This is dangerous. But let's do a little piece here. So put your tube cutter on the tube. And rotate, one rotation, little turn, every rotation, just a little turn. Okay. You're supposed to debarb these. We'll just kind of smooth it out like that. And what we do is we throw in the 3/8 slot there. And with just a hair sticking out, I'd say a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch out. Close it. You know what, I forgot. This often happens to me. I'm sure it happens to others that do this. What you actually need to do is put on your female piece first. A little bit protruding out there. Okay, so clamp this sucker down. Pretty much max it right out. Now I'll hold that nice and tight. Screw it in. And start twisting. This is a single bevel flare, I believe it's called. And this is pretty standard for propane lines, not natural gas, but propane. Give it a good reef down. That's a fair amount of torque to seat that. Yeah, it looks like a good one, a little oblong, but even all the way around. If you were to see a bad one, one side would be a lot more than the other side. One side would have a far larger flare. This one looks pretty good. Always test with soap and water after you install these. But yeah, that looks pretty good. Actually, you can kind of see if it gets much worse than that, it may not seal. Quick indication is just spin it on the. But yep, that's how it works. That will seal onto that. You pull this nut down, and it obviously can't go over that. And that's all there is to it. And you would hold this with a wrench and give it a good reef down, maybe 20 pounds, something like that, 20 foot-pounds. And in this particular case, I ran a flare fitting, a 3/8 flare fitting, to an elbow to a union directly into it. And I believe, perhaps I can confirm that's also it's a male 3/8 flare fitting that comes on it before the install. So you just make all those parts and bend the copper line nice and carefully to your outside fuel source. So our propane line runs right through the wall here, goes to this female elbow flare fitting connector, over to here, which goes to a T, which runs other things in the cabin, comes up into this auto changeover regulator. This thing has been great. It enables you to hook two propane tanks together, and it will, when this propane tank's empty, even though the lever is facing towards it, it will indicate red and change over to the other propane tank. What it also does is if these propane tanks start freezing on the inside, which happens if you draw from them a lot, it will also change over and use this one while that one thaws. So that's really helpful. If you're not around, it can help keep the cabin at a decent temperature. So as far as propane usage goes with that direct vent heater, I would say roughly, of course this depends on the temperature where you're at, but here with an average temperature of maybe 25 degrees Fahrenheit, a 20 pounder, which is about 5 gallons of propane, is going to be about 2.5 to 3 days with the heater consistently running in its lowest setting on a 1. And a 30 pound will probably get you 3.5 to 4 days in that environment. So all in all, what I have there is about a week of propane at this temperature. If you're a little warmer, expect to use less, and if it's colder, expect to use more. It's kind of a shame. It is not the most efficient heater. What's happening is it's expelling the carbon dioxide through these vents. On the inside of here, there's a pipe where your exhaust is. So a good chunk of the heat is escaping through carbon dioxide. But a nice part is you're sucking in clean air into the furnace. It doesn't pull any inside air into the heater. It's known to be more efficient pulling from the outside. Some wood stoves do it. A lot of things do it. But what I see in the future is possibly copper coils inside of there with some sort of liquid and maybe some sort of hot tub in here, or even running a traditional slant fin style heating system with a pump that runs back into the cabin to try to recapture some of that heat that's coming out. as far as the install with the exhaust, this bolts directly back into the back of the heater, just through the wall. And this is just a cutout hole. I think during your install, most folks cut this so this sits up against this gasket. I just didn't see the point. Get the exhaust a little farther away from the wall. And as far as operation of the heater, this part gets very warm. You know, you can't touch it when it's ripping. This stays relatively cool. Under here stays relatively cool, which is great because you can still put stuff around it and near it. You just need a little bit of space above it, which and I have flammables there, and we haven't even had any scares. So in order to operate it, you from the off position, you know, you have your propane turned on outside, and you're going to turn it to pilot. Press down, which I believe opens a valve and lets the propane in. And what we're going to do is press the piezo igniter there, that button. And while we're holding that knob down, and you can see that the igniter ignite. Okay, we have a pilot on, so I'm still holding it down, and I'm slowly going to let it up. Okay, so I'm not holding onto the knob now, and the pilot's just running. Now we'll turn it. We'll turn the knob here. Too low. Nothing yet. We'll turn it to 1. I assume that's because it's relatively warm in the cabin right now. About 2. There we go. So on 2, it ignited. So now we're up to temp. We're ripping now. I'll just turn it back down to a 1 because it will shut itself off, and the pilot light keeps the cabin at a nice temperature. If it's like 50 outside, it will keep it quite nice in here. And if just the pilot's on. So one question I had before buying this, I'd been looking them up for years, thinking this was the good route to go. Was how does this switch work? What you get, and it's great. This thing uses no electricity, but what I've discovered is low is like that. That will just run as low as it can go, indefinitely. But the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are both intensity, and they will shut the heater down back to the pilot light on and sense the temperature within the cabin. The proper little thermostat is what I'm getting at. But there's a high and a low that will run all the time as well. So what I've been finding in my 25 degree average temperature winter is I just leave it on a 1, and it will cycle on for maybe 10 minutes and shut off for 10 to 20 minutes and then cycle back on, which I'm thinking is conserving a ton of propane. I just leave it on 1 and kind of forget about it, and it stays about 60 inside the cabin all the time, and it's worked flawlessly the entire winter. Some downsides being that there's no blower, and for some odd reason these vents are sloped upwards, so it tends to send heat. It doesn't send heat towards the floor, so it does tend to be hotter upstairs. One little combat I had was you can put a little wood stove fan on there. I don't believe it works on a 1, but if it is colder, it'll get going. Wrong way. On 1, I assume you need more thermal mass, which could be as easy as laying a piece of plate steel down on top of that, and then it may work on a 1. But on a 2, I believe that thing goes pretty good. Helps keep the heat down. But yeah, really the only downsides to this thing are, it's not the most efficient heater on propane, but no electricity, which is nice. So it's a great backup source of heat, especially off-grid running on solar, and you don't have to worry about eating up power. I once had a RV furnace. I had it for actually 7 to 8 years, and it cycled on like a traditional hot air furnace, but it was semi-unreliable. I think it broke maybe 2 or 3 times in the 7 years. It's quite expensive to fix and complex. It was quite a bit more propane efficient, which was nice. I would say I'd probably get 4 days out of a 20-pound tank, maybe 5 out of a 30. But that's just because it would cycle on and off completely. It's quite quiet. That clicking that you can hear, maybe, it's just like a wood stove. It pops and bangs a little bit. It's almost silent most of the time, which is nice compared to the RV direct vent heaters. Those are quite loud and also use about 30 watts of power when they're running during their cycle. 300 to 400 watt hours per day. So we're saving that in electricity, and we can put it towards freezing food or lights or whatever. So this is kind of a nice low-tech way of doing this off-grid thing. So this is like what I have found so far is the best set it and forget it backup heater. At least if you're going to go the propane route. I've considered them all diesel waste oil burners, but this is relatively cost effective on purchasing it, quite easy to install, and I would like to possibly modify it a little bit to make it more efficient. I think that's pretty doable and good for a future project.